Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:37 is the time. Just sort of getting up to date with that case of the 15-year-old girl who was snatched from a park and raped by two teenage Afghan asylum seekers. They were yesterday jailed for about 10 years each. Of course, they won't serve 10 years. Let's not pretend that. Just some of the footage that was filmed by the 15-year-old girl, 3 minutes of footage when she was being dragged away. This is incredibly extraordinary. This is a new development. She had pleaded with passers-by for help as she was being dragged away, shouting, "You're going to rape me, leave me alone." And one woman in particular said, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" She said, "No, I'm not. And then the woman didn't intervene any further. Now, maybe the woman was scared herself. I don't know how big these 17-year-olds are. Some 17-year-olds are, 6-foot lads, whether she felt it was safe or not to intervene. But either way, you can see a 15-year-old girl begging for help, and you're asking if she's okay, and she says no, and then not intervening, but other passers-by, she was crying for help and no one intervened. This is another thing that we need to talk about in this country. Tom Slater?
No, exactly. It's one of those things where, as you say, we don't know all of the details and we don't know what was going through that passer-by's head when she came across this horrific scene. You're concerned enough to ask a girl if she's okay. She said she isn't.
Yeah. But this is something that you do see time and again. And
people being raped on tubes and no one's saying anything.
I know, the kind of bystander phenomenon, which is really disconcerting. I mean, not as horrific as the crime itself, obviously. And you can understand why people do respond to things in different ways. But we should have a norm in this country or any civilised country where the compulsion is to act, even if you're not entirely sure, even if you are a little bit scared, because the costs are too great otherwise.
Exactly. Well, Amy Gallagher joins us now. She's a former NHS nurse and a commentator at New Cultural Forum. Amy, I wanted to talk to you about a lot of the trans issues, but I'm wondering if you wanted to comment on that, because I think that whole case is horrific anyway. We import these people and then they completely abuse the hospitality. I think we've quite wrongly shown to them. They've been convicted and jailed. Yes, as I just said, you did know what you were doing. But the fact that passers-by were aware of this girl screaming and didn't help.
Yeah, I think it really shows that the kind of social contract of this country is breaking down, in that people just see themselves as kind of atomised individuals. And there's this particularly in London, I feel it, a kind of hostile, almost dog-eat-dog atmosphere where it's just, look after yourself.
Not my problem.
Yeah, and it's a shame. And it never used to be like that. The change has happened so rapidly where people just think I'm just going to look after myself.
Yeah, she may not have felt safe, this woman, but again, if you don't feel safe, I'm guessing the 15-year-old being dragged by two 17-year-olds, I know I would intervene, because I have intervened in cases where I felt that women are, and I've, literally tackled people on the tube when they're harassing a woman. And I'm just one of those people. I'm also luckily 5'11", and I've got a very good headmistressy manner, which can usually sort of stop a bloke in his tracks. But yeah, okay, dark street, you might be, but I don't know. I just can't imagine a scenario where I wouldn't have tried to do something.
Yeah, it seems remarkable that this woman obviously was noticed something was happening and asked, and then didn't do anything. So it was almost like, okay, there is something happening.
Are you okay? No. What, then you just walk away?
What then? Yeah, and to not have called anyone. I mean, gosh, no. I mean, as you said, we don't know the full details, but it does. I do think it speaks to something more broader that's happening in the country.
I absolutely think absolutely, it's stuff that you talk about often at the New Culture Forum. Let's talk about the general madness of the trans ideology. You've been a fantastic advocate on this. Of course, you used to work at the Tavistock Clinic. We'll get on to the puberty block of the trial in a moment. But this extraordinary case, the Sandie Peggie case, which an NHS nurse in Fife, she goes into the changing room to change her clothes, and she's taking off underwear, and there's a man in there. He may have called himself a woman, but he's not a woman, he's a man. Dr. Beth Upton. Apparently, he had feminine clothing, and he used feminine pronouns, and he had long hair, so apparently we're all supposed to pretend he's a woman. He's not a woman, he's a man. But he was in there. She asked him to leave. He accused her of bullying and harassment. She then was suspended by the NHS Trust. She took them to court over her treatment. 2 years this case has been going on. And yesterday there was a partial victory. Yes, she had been harassed by the NHS Trust, but an extraordinary ruling from the tribunal judge, who was a man, it must be noted, that she wasn't wrong for the Trust to allow a man to be in the changing rooms until she complained. And crucially, he said he'd taken into account the Supreme Court ruling in April, which made it very clear that single-sex spaces are only for that one sex, therefore. How on earth has this ruling happened when it's completely at odds with the Supreme Court ruling in April?
Yeah, I mean, this ruling kind of shows the limitations of the Supreme Court ruling and the fact that within the Equality Act, there is still this protected characteristic of gender reassignment. And the judge said he was trying to balance that with the protected characteristic of sex. The issue is that NHS Fife basically gave permission to Dr. Upton, the male doctor, who says he's a woman or female, to use the female changing room. In other words, they effectively rendered it a mixed changing
without telling the women.
So yeah, putting women at risk, obviously. But they are, they are allowed to do that. They are allowed to change the rules of what their own policy is, of course. And then when she complained, then it became an issue because then it's about her rights as a woman.
Yeah.
But what this does mean, I mean, we're waiting for the government guidance to come through about the Supreme Court ruling.
Well, this is the Equality and Human Rights Commission. They said, but the Baroness Faulkner, who's just left that job last week running that commission, she said that the government has had it for months. I mean, they've had it for months and months on end, and they're just sitting on it.
Yeah, because it's going to cause all sorts of problems. I mean, does this mean, I don't know. I mean, this is a 300-page long judgment, so it's going to take a long time for people to wade through it and understand it. But does this mean that every NHS hospital, if they want to have a single-sex changing room, they've got to explicitly kind of bar trans women? They've got to say trans women cannot use this single-sex space. It's single-sex only. Do they have to be very, very clear in that sense? Because what it means is that some NHS organisations that buy into gender ideology, they might say something's female, but do they mean female can mean a doctor like Dr. Upton, who's a man and says he's female? So yeah. It's still.
But again, we all thought that the Supreme Court. I remember on the day that Supreme Court judgment came out, the For Women Scotland case, that the definition of a woman was based on biological sex. And we're all cheering. It was a great case to have. But actually, it didn't. It hasn't changed everything. Loads of parts of the NHS, Parliament itself, government buildings, loads of places haven't actually changed any of their rules on this. Lots of schools haven't. They're all waiting for guidance. No, you don't need guidance. It's established the law. It's established the law was always that case. You've all misinterpreted the law all this time, and you need to stop doing it. Even, Labour parties agreed to their Labour Women's Conference. No, you're not in the main hall, or the speakers. No, you're not allowed to be a man. I don't care what you identify as. You're a man. You're not allowed to be it. So they've accepted it. It's interesting. Some do, some don't, and yet we're not. Everyone's sort of tiptoeing around this. But the law is very clear and explicit, and I don't understand how this judge can come to this, other than the fact that it's rather obvious where the judge lies, because he actually spoke at one point about being assigned female at birth. Once someone uses a phrase like that, they're captured.
Yeah, I mean, this ruling really does show that gender ideology is very much alive and well, not just in the NHS, but in the judiciary. As I said, the language, like you pointed out, was very in the style of gender ideology. There was one point that was made that it was quite plausible that this doctor had been, in quotes, living as a woman because he had a feminine manner, a feminine voice, and wore feminine makeup.
There you are.
Deeply offensive to women.
We're just a costume. There's men, and then there's thinking you're a woman and wearing the costume of being a woman, and that's what makes you a woman. We are simply figments of men's imagination.
Yeah, I mean, what about women that don't wear makeup or don't have a feminine sounding voice, whatever that is? So
Hello.
It's
No, but it's like Eddie Izzard, and I'm a girl when I wear heels, and I'm a boy when I wear flat shoes. When I'm at work, I've got my trainers on under the table. I'm a boy then.
And also quite astounding that it came up in the judgment that it was deemed that trans women, in other words, men, are at no greater risk to women in a change than biological women. And we know, I mean, I don't know how you get over the fact that pretty much all rapes and the vast majority of sexual assaults are committed by men against women.
Well, legally, it's not, in England, it's not possible to commit rape unless you're a man. But also, as one of our callers pointed out, and I've seen those stats, in terms of the representation of among trans-identified prisoners in prison, let's face it, a lot of them are just trying to get a better deal and get into women's prison when they could do that, although there are still some men in women's prisons pretending to be women. The rate of so-called trans identity among sex offenders way higher, way higher than among the ordinary prison population. I mean, I think that tells you everything. The reason why women don't want men in their changing rooms or their toilets is because they're men.
Yes, and as we know, for a lot of people,
that simple.
This is a sexual fetish for a lot of these men.
Yeah. There are men. I think we're all sympathetic to the men who, some men and some women, believe quite wrongly that they are born in the wrong body and they have what's called gender dysphoria. And people don't like this phrase, but it is a mental health issue because you're not born in the wrong body, but you think it's like, say, an anorexic thinks they're fat. They're not fat. they're very, very skinny. And someone thinks, and we should be sympathetic and respectful and kind and, you know, but that doesn't mean you just then open it up to anyone who goes, I think I'll just put on a dress and some lipstick and I can go and watch women get in and out of their undies. Sorry, no.
And absolutely, and it also, I mean, this person, this Dr. Upton, had only been so-called identifying as a woman for not only a couple of years, and hadn't gone through any kind of surgery. Not
as most of them haven't.
That would make any.
No.
I don't think it would make any difference personally, but it is important to make that point, that it does seem that for a lot of these people, this idea that they're transitioning, it's quite a mild transition.
They put on a dress and grown their hair, and that's it. Everything else is intact. They are still. You want to cut your bits off. That's another conversation, but most of them haven't. But even if they haven't, or if they have, they're still a man. Can I ask you about the puberty blockers? Because you talked about this. You know, you're very knowledgeable on this issue, having worked at the Tavistock, where they were just handing out these horrific, life-changing, body-changing drugs to young children like they were sweeties. We've still got Wes Street and the Health Secretary adamant they're going to go ahead with this NHS trial of more than 200 youngsters, and down to the age of 10 or 11, to give them puberty blockers. And we're told that we have to just prove like whether or not puberty blockers can help kids or not. I mean, we know this is damaging physically healthy children's bodies. There's quite a backlash to this. There's talk about legal action. I know that you've been involved with James Esses and talk about this, who's been a fantastic campaigner on this issue. There's now Labour MPs who are getting in the act saying, this is not something we want to be doing. This is such an unethical trial. There is no upside to this. This is medically transforming the bodies of perfectly healthy children. Do you think there's any chance we can actually stop this horrific, frankly, Joseph Mengele-style trial going ahead?
I hope so. I do hope so. I feel very disappointed with Wes Streeting on this.
Yep.
He was changing his mind on these issues, but it seems actually as though he's gone backwards. I mean, I would say we've already had a clinical trial. We've seen what it does. We've seen the harms that
thousands of children.
There wasn't any follow-ups for any of those children, but they're all still alive. Many of them you could still talk to. The issue is that this whole idea of puberty blockers, it's still predicated on this idea that you could be born in the wrong body.
Yeah.
It's almost as though there's some children that will be a kind of true transgender child and some that won't. And we need to kind of test how we treat this issue. I mean, the idea that it's going to be for children as young as 10 who are showing signs of gender incongruence, that's what it says. Yeah. They don't even need a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. Not that, for me, that wouldn't be okay anyway, but just they need to just show that there's an expressed interest in a kind of gender that's different to their sex. And then you're going to change their body straight away at age 10. I mean, it's obscene and it's totally unethical. And many of the side effects, like sterility, effects to sex drive, effects to bone density, these will only show up later in life. Yeah. And actually, this trial is going to be looking at the effects after 2 years only. Yeah.
So, it's not even a proper trial. There's no sort of control group or anything. And we'll talk about this hopefully with some time with Carl Hennigan as well, who was Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine. It is genuinely obscene. You keep up the fantastic work, and we can help you, because I know this is, again, another common sense issue. Tom Slater?
Well, it's one of those reminders that the fight isn't over where any of this is concerned with the puberty blockers, with Sandie Peggie in these tribunal cases. We can't just rely on top-down rulings to change what is basically a cultural problem within so many of our institutions. You sort that out and you prove that people's concerns aren't going away. That's when things
I still want a lot of people sacked. I really do. I'm sorry. I'm probably imprisoned. Big thanks to Amy Gallagher there.